December 7th, 1942. Combined Operations Headquarters, London. Vice Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten stares at reconnaissance photos of Bordeaux Harbor, France. 5 German cargo ships, merchant vessels converted to blockade runners carrying critical war supplies from the Far East. Rubber, tin, tungsten, materials Germany desperately needs to sustain the war effort. The ships sit in Bordeaux Harbor, 70 miles upriver from the Atlantic coast, protected by coastal batteries, defended by German naval forces, surrounded by occupied French territory, crawling with Wehrmacht patrols. Our RAF bombers can't reach them. The harbor is too far inland for effective bombing runs. The ships are too well defended for conventional naval assault. And intelligence reports indicate the vessels will depart within 2 weeks, returning to the Far East for another cargo run. Major Herbert Blondie Hassler sits across the table, waiting for Mountbatten's decision. Hassler commands the Royal Marines Boom Patrol Detachment, a unit specializing in small boat operations. He's proposed a plan so audacious that most staff officers dismissed it as suicide. 10 men, 5 two-man kayaks, paddle 70 miles upriver through German-occupied territory, attack the ships with limpet mines, escape overland to Spain, all without motor noise. Radio communication or backup support. Mountbatten looks up from the photos. The chiefs of staff call this Operation Frankton. I call it near certain death. What makes you think it will work? Hassler doesn't hesitate. Because the Germans won't expect it, sir. They're defending against aircraft and naval attack. They're not defending against 10 men in kayaks. 10 men can't sink 5 ships. 10 men with limpet mines can, sir. Each kayak carries 8 limpets. 40 mines total. Each mine contains 8 pounds of plastic explosive. That's 320 pounds of explosives. Properly placed below the waterline, that's enough to sink or severely damage every ship in the harbor. Mountbatten studies the young major. Hassler is 28 years old, former yacht racer turned Royal Marine. No conventional military background, just a fanatic enthusiasm for small boats and an engineer's understanding of explosives and naval architecture. The river current is 4 knots. The tides are extreme. You'll be paddling at night with no navigation aids through one of the most heavily defended river approaches in occupied Europe. If anyone sees you, you're captured or killed. If you're captured, you're likely executed as saboteurs. Yes, sir. That's why we've trained for 6 months on similar rivers in Britain. We've practiced night navigation, silent paddling, mine placement, and survival techniques. The men are ready. Mountbatten makes his decision. You have authorization. But understand, Major Hassler, if you're captured, the British government will deny any knowledge of this operation. You'll be on your own. Understood, sir. We're always on our own once we launch the kayaks. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the small unit operations that changed strategic outcomes through audacity and training, hit that subscribe button. 70% of you watching aren't subscribed yet, and you're missing educational military history content like this every week. The Royal Marines Boom Patrol Detachment was formed in July 1942, specifically to develop small boat attack capabilities. Major Hassler, who had extensive yachting experience before the war, recognized that kayaks could penetrate harbor defenses that submarines and motor torpedo boats couldn't approach. The concept was simple, but required exceptional execution. 2-man kayaks, called cockles in British military terminology, could be launched from submarines offshore. The kayakers would paddle silently into enemy harbors, attach limpet mines to ship hulls below the waterline, set delayed fuses, paddle away. The mines would detonate hours later when the commandos were safely away, but the execution was anything but simple. The kayaks were canvas-covered wooden frames, 15 feet long, weighing 80 pounds empty. They had to carry 2 men, paddles, camping equipment, weapons, food for a week, and 8 limpet mines each. Total loaded weight exceeded 700 pounds. Navigation at night on tidal rivers required exceptional skill. The teams would paddle during flood tide when water moved upriver, then hide during ebb tide when water flowed back to sea. Progress would be approximately 20 miles per night, 4 nights of paddling to reach Bordeaux from the submarine launch point. The training was brutal. Hassler selected volunteers from Royal Marines who could swim, had small boat experience, and demonstrated extraordinary physical fitness. From 34 volunteers, he selected 12 men. 2 would be reserves. Training began in August 1942 in the Scottish Highlands and Welsh Rivers. The Commandos practiced capsizing drills, wet exits from overturned kayaks, mine attachment techniques, and night navigation. They learned to paddle silently, using a technique that avoided splash sounds. They trained in cold water until hypothermia exposure became routine. The specialized equipment required careful engineering. The limpet mines used powerful horseshoe magnets to attach to steel ship hulls. The magnetic clamp had to be strong enough to hold 8 pounds of explosive plus detonator against a curved surface while water surged around it. But it couldn't be so strong that commandos couldn't remove it if placement was incorrect. The fuses were time delay pencil fuses, chemical timers that could be set for delays between 2 and 9 hours. The commandos would set the fuses for different delays, ensuring mines detonated at intervals. This prevented countermeasures and created maximum psychological impact. The kayaks themselves required modifications. Standard cockpits were too small for men wearing full combat gear and carrying mines. Hassler designed enlarged cockpits with spray covers that could be quickly released in emergencies. He added compass mounts for night navigation. He installed camouflage netting holders to conceal the kayaks during daytime hiding. By November 1942, the team was ready. Hassler selected the final assault team, 10 men, 5 kayaks. Each kayak had a crew name: Catfish, Hassler and Marine Bill Sparks; Crayfish, Corporal Albert Lever and Marine William Mills; Conger, Corporal George Sherd and Marine David Marfat; Coalfish, Sergeant Samuel Wallace and Marine Robert Ewart; Cuttlefish, Lieutenant John McKinnon and Marine James Conway. December 7, 1942, 1,830 hours. HMS Tuna, a T-class submarine, surfaces off the Gironde estuary on the French coast. The sea state is rough. Waves exceed 6 feet. The submarine's deck pitches violently. The commandos manhandle the kayaks through the submarine hatch and assemble them on the heaving deck. Each kayak must be assembled from component sections and loaded with equipment and mines. In darkness, in heavy seas, while the submarine maintains position against wind and current. The launch begins at 1930 hours. Catfish goes first. Hassler and Sparks paddle clear of the submarine. Crayfish launches. Then disaster strikes. As Coalfish is being lowered into the water, a wave catches the kayak and smashes it against the submarine hull. The kayak capsizes. Wallace and Ewart are thrown into the frigid water. The submarine crew pulls them aboard. The kayak is destroyed. Coalfish is out of the mission before it begins. 2 men down, 8 remaining. Conger launches successfully. Cuttlefish prepares to launch, but during the transfer, a securing line snaps. The kayak falls and damages the hull. Cuttlefish is taking water. McKinnon and Conway launch anyway, hoping to bail fast enough to stay afloat. Within 200 yards of the submarine, Cuttlefish is visibly foundering. McKinnon signals that they're sinking. Hassler makes the hardest decision of the night. He signals McKinnon to make for shore independently. Cuttlefish won't make it to Bordeaux. McKinnon and Conway will have to save themselves. 4 kayaks remain. 8 men. Hassler leads the formation toward the Gironde estuary. The paddle begins at 2,030 hours on December 7th. They have 70 miles to go, 4 nights of paddling, and now they are operating with only half their original firepower. The first night's paddle is nightmare. The tidal current runs at 4 knots against them. Progress is agonizingly slow. The kayaks are overloaded. Every paddle stroke fights the current. After 6 hours, they've covered less than 10 miles. Dawn approaches. They must hide before daylight reveals them. Hassler spots a small island with marshland vegetation. The 4 kayaks pull ashore. The commandos camouflage the boats with nets and marsh grass. Then they hide in the vegetation, lying motionless in freezing mud. German patrol boats pass within 50 yards during the day. The commandos don't move, don't speak, barely breathe. 8 men lying in marsh mud for 12 hours waiting for darkness. Night 2, December 8th. The paddle resumes. The tide is favorable now. The kayaks make better progress, but the river is narrowing. More patrol boats, more shore installations, more risk of discovery. At 0300 hours, disaster strikes again. Conger, paddled by Sherd and Moffat, disappears. Hassler sees them in the distance, then they're gone. He doesn't know if they capsized, were captured, or were shot. Conger simply vanishes. 3 kayaks remain, 6 men, 60% casualties, and they haven't even reached the target yet. Hassler considers a boarding, but they've come too far. 3 kayaks still means 24 limpet mines. That's enough to damage the blockade runners. They continue upriver. Day 2 hiding, December 9th. The remaining kayakers find concealment in marsh grass near a small village. German vehicles pass on nearby roads. Civilian fishermen work within 100 yards. The commandos remain frozen. Night 3, December 9th, 10th. The paddle becomes surreal. They're deep in German-controlled territory now. Bordeaux is only 20 miles ahead. Every mile brings them closer to the target and deeper into danger. At 0200 hours, crayfish separates from the formation. Hassler never sees Lever and Mills again. Whether they had navigation problems, capsized, or were captured remains unknown. 2 kayaks remain, 4 men, Hassler and Sparks in Catfish. Marine Alan Ellery and Marine Eric Fisher in Wait. Fisher and Ellery weren't part of the mission. History records show only Catfish remained operational by this point. Let me correct. Only Catfish, crewed by Hassler and Sparks, reached Bordeaux. Every other kayak had been eliminated. Of the original 10 men, only 2 remained. They had 16 limpet mines, 8 per kayak. Night 4, December 10th, 11th. Hassler and Sparks paddle the final miles to Bordeaux Harbor. They arrive at 2100 hours. The harbor is lit by dark lights. German guards patrol the piers. Ships sit at anchor, dark shapes against the lights. Hassler identifies the targets, 5 ships, but with only 16 mines they can't attack all effectively. He prioritizes. 2 large cargo ships get primary attention. 6 mines each, placed systematically along the hull below the waterline. The remaining 4 mines go to a 3rd vessel. The mine placement takes 90 minutes, working silently in darkness, paddling between ships, placing magnetic mines without making sounds that would alert guards, setting time delay fuses for detonation at dawn. At 2330 hours, the mines are placed. Hassler and Sparks paddle away from Bordeaux. They need distance before the explosions. They paddle through the night, putting 15 miles between themselves and the harbor. December 12th, 0630 hours. The first mines detonate. Massive underwater explosions rip through ship hulls. The cargo ships Tannenfels and Portland are severely damaged. A 3rd vessel, the Alabama, takes moderate damage. 2 ships are immobilized. 1 requires extensive repairs. But Hassler and Sparks don't know this yet. They're hiding in marsh vegetation 15 miles downriver, listening to distant explosions and hoping they succeeded. Their mission now is escape. They scuttle the kayak, bury their equipment, and begin the overland journey to Spain. 100 miles south through German-occupied France. Dressed as French civilians, speaking no French, carrying forged papers, the journey takes 8 weeks. They walk at night, hide during day, rely on French resistance contacts arranged before the mission. The resistance provides safe houses, food, and guidance. On February 18, 1943, Hassler and Sparks cross into Spain. They make contact with British authorities in Gibraltar. On March 2nd, they arrive in Britain. Of the other 8 commandos, none survived. McKinnon and Conway from Cuttlefish were captured within hours of landing. They were executed by the Germans in March 1943. Lever, Mills, Sherd, and Moffat were captured at various points. All were executed under Hitler's commando order, which mandated execution of captured special forces. Wallace and Ewart, who never launched due to the damaged kayak, returned to Britain aboard HMS Tuna. Operation Frankton achieved its objective despite 80% casualties. The German ships were damaged severely enough to be out of action for months. The psychological impact on German harbor defenses was significant. Resources were diverted to increased patrols, security, and countermeasures. Post-war analysis estimated that delaying those blockade runners for 3 months eliminated approximately 60,000 tons of strategic materials from German war industry: tungsten for armor-piercing ammunition, rubber for vehicle production, tin for electronics. The materials shortage contributed to German production problems in 1943. Churchill, personally briefed on the operation, called it the finest operation of its kind during the war. The citation was classified until 1948. Major Hassler received the Distinguished Service Order. Marine Sparks received the Distinguished Service Medal. The executed commandos were posthumously mentioned in dispatches. Their families weren't informed of the details until after the war ended. The mission became known as Operation Frankton officially, and the Cockleshell Heroes popularly after a 1955 film dramatized the story. The film took liberties with facts, but captured the essential audacity of the operation. The Royal Marines today consider Operation Frankton a foundational mission for special operations methodology. The principles demonstrated thorough training, equipment adaptation, operational security, and individual initiative under impossible conditions became doctrine for special forces worldwide. The Special Boat Service, the Royal Navy's Special Forces Unit, traces its lineage directly to Hassler's Boom Patrol Detachment. Modern SBS operations still use many techniques pioneered during Frankton training. The limpet mine technology developed for Frankton influenced all subsequent underwater demolition equipment. The magnetic attachment principle remains standard for underwater explosives. The time delay fuse concepts evolved into modern smart fuses. The operational concept of submarine-launched small boat raids became standard for multiple navies. U.S. Navy SEAL, Soviet Naval Spetsnaz, and other special forces adopted variations of the kayak-launched approach. The psychological lesson was equally important. 10 men in kayaks achieved what would have required major bomber raids or naval task forces. The force multiplication factor of specialized training and equipment became undeniable. Today, the Royal Marines Museum in Portsmouth displays one of the original Cockle kayaks. The wooden frame, now preserved, shows the wear from the mission. The canvas covering has been replaced, but the structure remains original. Educational displays explain the navigation techniques, mine placement procedures, and escape planning. Museum programs use Frankton as a teaching case for mission planning under constraints, equipment adaptation, and calculated risk acceptance. Major Hassler survived the war, continuing in Royal Marines until retirement. He returned to yacht racing, winning multiple international competitions. He died in 1987 at age 73. His obituary in the Times called him one of the most innovative military minds of the war. Marine Sparks lived until 2002. He rarely spoke publicly about the mission, uncomfortable with celebrity. When interviewed, he insisted he was just doing his job. "We trained for it, we executed, 2 of us survived, 8 didn't, that's how it was." The 8 executed commandos are buried in France. Their graves are maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Annual memorial services honor their sacrifice. The operational lessons from Frankton remain relevant. Modern special operations face similar challenges: penetrating defended areas, operating without support, achieving strategic effects with minimal force. The principles Hassler demonstrated in 1942 appear in mission planning today. The mission also teaches painful lessons. 80% casualty rates are unsustainable. Only exceptional circumstances justify such risk. The strategic value of delaying blockade runners had to be measured against 8 lives lost. Post-war military ethics discussions use Frankton as a case study in proportionality. Did the strategic benefit justify the human cost? Military historians debate this. The consensus is that in context of 1942, when Britain fought for survival, such risks were justified. In other contexts, they might not be. The legacy of the Cockleshell Heroes extends beyond military history. It's studied in business schools as an example of mission planning and risk management. It appears in leadership courses teaching initiative and adaptation under pressure. The story resonates because it's fundamentally human. 10 ordinary men, trained extraordinarily, attempting the impossible. 8 paying the ultimate price. 2 succeeding against odds that should have been insurmountable. Sometimes strategic objectives require accepting terrible risks. Sometimes 10 men in kayaks can achieve what armies cannot. Sometimes training, determination, and audacity overcome impossible odds. The Cockleshell Heroes proved all 3 propositions at devastating cost, but they proved them.